Hello everybody, it's Sara. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you all about all of the books that I read in April. So once again in April I read 10 books, which I'm very happy about. Some of them were absolutely amazing. I actually found a new favorite this month, which is really great. But then some of them were also not so great, and we're gonna have to start with those because the beginning of the month was a little bit rough, let me tell you. I read 3 books, one of which was really not great, and then the other 2 I had really high expectations for them and they were sadly kind of disappointing. So let's get into this first and then we can end on a brighter note. The first book that I want to talk about is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This is a Greek mythology retelling that focuses mainly on the myth of Theseus and the Minotaur, but from the perspective of Ariadne. And I tend to really love feminist Greek mythology retellings. As you may already know, Circe by Madeline Miller is like one of my favorite books of all time. But I should really stop reading Greek mythology retellings if they're not written by Madeline Miller, because I was very disappointed in this book, which is so sad because, like I said, I had very high hopes for this. I had heard so many incredible things about it, but I found like the more that we got into the story, the more bored I actually became, and that usually doesn't happen to me. Normally I read the part that we already know about the Greek myth, because obviously that's the point of retellings, and especially feminist retellings, is that we go beyond the story to give all of these female characters the chance to tell their tale, basically. And in this one I actually found the first part with like everything that I knew to be the most interesting, and then after that I just got so bored. And you know what I usually love about feminist Greek retellings is that we give these female characters that are very often forgotten in their own story, and we also give them agency. And I found that in this book things were still very much done to the main female characters instead of them finally taking like their destiny into their own hands. And the ending especially left a very bad taste in my mouth. You know, this book talks on and on about the way that gods play with humans, and especially with women, to fulfill their own cruel agenda, and I mean, that's still pretty much what happened at the end of this book. And obviously the nature of a retelling is to tell a story that has already been told, so you don't necessarily want to change everything about it, but I still found that there was something definitely lacking into this book to keep me engaged throughout, and yeah, it was just very disappointing. I enjoyed some parts of the writing, but the story overall was not for me. Then I went into the next book that I'm going to talk about with way lower expectations, because I had heard some very mixed reviews about this series, and that book is The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. Like everybody else, I feel like in March I watched the 2nd season of Bridgerton and completely fell in love with Katani and their dynamic and the angst and the yearning. So obviously I was like, okay, I should maybe give the book series a try. So I knew going into this that there are a lot of differences between the book and the series, because I had heard of those differences, and I also had heard some very mixed things about Julia Quinn as a writer, like I said, and I have to say that I completely agree with all of these reviews because this was not well written. I found the writing to be so cringy at times, like literally I was laughing when I was not supposed to be laughing, and you all know that's not a good sign. Like when you're reading a book and you're laughing at some parts and you're not supposed to be laughing, that is not a good sign. And I am someone who really enjoys romance. Like I have to say this like right off the bat, I'm not hating on the genre or anything. I love Regency era romance and I love how ridiculous they are and all of the social rules and all of that, but this was just not it. I did not enjoy many of the interactions between the characters. I thought that Anthony was the worst, and being in his head for most part of the book was not a great time. I thought that he was like so overbearing and like weirdly aggressive, and also some of the things that happened between him and Kate were not exactly like consensual. Like it was very wacky in terms of consent, and I was just not here for that. And I find it so funny when people talk about historical romance and they're like, it's not supposed to be feminist. The romance love interests aren't supposed to be like feminist icons because it's not like historically accurate, but like none of this is trying to be historically accurate anyways, so why am I cringing and being completely disgusted by this man for the sake of historical accuracy? Like, I'm reading romance to be entertained and wooed, and I was not while reading this book. Let's just say it like that. I'm not going to rant anymore because I feel like I've said enough already. If you want to read all of my thoughts, I have a very long review up on Goodreads, so you can go and check that out in the description box. But yeah, if you enjoyed the TV show, I would definitely stick to that because it's definitely better, and I'm saying that knowing that Bridgerton is honestly a train wreck and most of the character development makes absolutely no sense. So that gives you an idea. I will not be reading any of the other books from that series. Then the next book that I want to talk about is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. As you may already know, I really love In the Dream House by the same author, so I was so excited to finally read this collection of short stories because I had heard really good things about it, but I have to say that I was kind of disappointed by this one as well, which is very sad. When I started this book, I actually got so excited because the first two quotes on the front of the book are absolutely amazing. The first one says, "My body is a haunted house that I am lost in. There are no doors, but there are knives and 100 windows." That is by Jacques Germain. I don't know if they're French, but anyway, that's their name. And then the second quote really got me so excited. It says, "God should have made girls lethal when he made monsters of men." And that is a quote by Elizabeth Hewer. Then I started to read the first two short stories and I really enjoyed those. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm so excited. And then I got to this like very long one that I think is like inspired by CSI or like the special unit thing, like, you know, this series, like this cop series, and it was so long and so boring, and it really took me right out. I just could not be bothered with that story. And then I read the two last one and I enjoyed them, but like they weren't as good as the two first ones for me. So yeah, it just was so sad because the beginning was so strong and I was so excited about it, and then I slowly lost interest, which is really a shame. I have to say though that the writing in this is absolutely insane. Like, Carmen Maria Machado has some of the best writing I've ever read, and she can create this like weird, bizarre and dark atmosphere that is just so good. Like, even though some of the things in here completely did not make any sense, honestly, I did not understand what the heck was happening like half of the time, but even so, the writing was so good in this. There were so many good lines that it almost made up for the fact that I was a little bit disappointed by some of these stories. If that's your thing and you also love, you know, like horror and storytelling, then I would definitely recommend this one, especially for the fall. Like, I feel like this is such a fall kind of spooky, very strange, things don't make a lot of sense collection. So yeah, kind of disappointed about it, but I also just really love the writing in this, so I would still recommend it. And then things finally started to look up because I read what is now one of my new favorite books of all time, and that book is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. Honestly, if you would have told me at the beginning of the year that this would be one of the best books that I've read this year so far, I would not have believed you, because I never in 1,000 years thought that I was going to enjoy this book as much as I did. I feel like most people know what this book is about because it's been very popular, but just in case you don't, this is a collection of short essays in which John Green talks about certain human experiences or things that were created by humans, and at the end of each essay he gives them a rating out of 5 stars. And I had heard so many incredible things about this book, so I went into it thinking like, you know, oh, I'll probably like enjoy this, okay. But let me tell you, I listened to the audiobook for this first of all, which was absolutely amazing. It is narrated by John Green himself and he does such a great job, and I am not joking when I'm telling you that I laughed out loud while listening to this book, and I also sobbed while doing the dishes. The range that all of these essays have is absolutely incredible, and I love that John Green can take like the most mundane things, the things that we don't even think about on a daily basis, and he gives them like that much importance and meaning, and it's just absolutely incredible. I feel like he is also kind of like this well of random knowledge. Like there were certain things in here that are so obscure that I had never heard about, but I was just listening to him talking about it and I was completely fascinated. He has just such a way with words, and he also honestly managed to reignite my hope in humanity, like just a little bit, like just enough, with this book, and it was just so incredibly good. Like I'm not joking, this is probably going to be in my top 3 favorite books of the year. The way that John Green understands the human experience and the way that he manages to talk about it in such a vulnerable and raw and just beautiful way just completely blew me away. And like honestly, go read this book. I could not recommend it enough. It's so good. And there is this one essay about sunsets, and that's the one that made me sob while I was doing my dishes, and I will never see sunsets the same way ever again. It was just so good. Then the next book that I read was actually a reread for me, and that book was Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. I've already talked about this book a lot on my channel because I read it last year and really enjoyed it. This is such a fun story about Eve, who is the younger of the Brown sisters, and she is basically kicked out of her house by her parents because she needs to hold a job because they are just sick of her going in every direction with her life. So she ends up into this little village where there is an inn, and because of very funny and weird circumstances, she ends up working over there with the owner, whose name I suddenly cannot remember. But yeah, he's the owner of the inn. He's a very grumpy man. They don't really like each other, but obviously because this is a romance book, they fall in love. I think that out of the 3 Brown sisters novel, this is probably my favorite because I'm just such a big fan of the sunshine and grumpy dynamic, and I thought that Eve and whatever his name is, Jacob, it's Jacob, I thought that they're so cute and they're so funny, and I just really love their banter. And yeah, I think this book is so sweet. It also has great autistic representation, so if you're looking for that in the romance books that you're reading, I would definitely recommend this one. And you know, I just wanted a little bit of sunshine in my life, so I decided to reread this one because I knew that it was going to be a fun time. Then the next book that I read was A Marvellous Light by Freya Marske. I'm not completely sure how you're supposed to pronounce her name, but this is basically a fantasy romance that takes place, I think, into the Victorian era. A quote in here says that it is set in Edwardian England. I don't really know what that means, but you know, in the old days. And we basically follow this man who is hired as this kind of like link between the government and this magical society that has been hiding in England for centuries. And we basically follow him as he is thrown into this huge mystery that could change the face of England forever. And his unlikely ally in this quest is actually his equivalent, but for the magical side. So they both have to work together even though they don't really like each other. They don't really trust one another, and obviously romance ensues. This was definitely more of a romance novel rather than a fantasy novel, I want to say, even though there is a lot of magic. Like none of the world building or the magical system is really explained. You're kind of just like thrown into it, just like Robin, our main character, is. And I found it a little bit confusing at first, also because the writing is quite dense. This has such very beautiful flowery writing, but it took me a little while to get used to it at first, and I was just a little bit confused with everything. But once I got used to it, and once I just stopped trying to understand basically everything that was happening, it got really good. That's not to say that the plot is overly complex or hard to follow. It's basically kind of like a murder mystery with magic thrown in there, which I did really enjoy. I also really loved the dynamic between the 2 characters. I loved their banter and their relationship. Also, there were some spicy scenes in here, and when I say spicy, I mean spicy. If you enjoy that kind of stuff, you will be served. Like I said, the writing in this is so beautiful, so if you enjoy that, then I would definitely recommend this book, and overall this was definitely a very fun ride. And then finally, the last 4 books that I needed to talk about for this video will probably be absolutely no surprise to all of you, and these books are all 4 volumes of the Heartstopper graphic novel series. My friend has the second one with her, hence why I don't have it here. But yeah, Heartstopper came out, in case you don't know, in case you've been like living under a rock. The adaptation of this wonderful, beautiful, exceptional graphic novel, and obviously I'm obsessed with it. I loved it so much. I posted a review of it on my channel. If you want to go and check it out, I will leave it linked in the cards. But of course, the second I finished watching the series for like the second or the third time, I don't exactly remember, I had to start a reread of the graphic novels because I love them so much. They are the light of my life. Probably my favorite thing that Alice Oseman has ever done. And if you haven't read them and if you still haven't watched the show, then I highly encourage you to do so because they will bring you such happiness and joy, and they're absolutely perfect. And I've talked about these so many times on my channel that I don't think that I need to say more because you all already know how much I love them. I've just been in my little heartstopper bliss bubble for the last week, and honestly it's been a great time. Alright, here we are. These are all of the books that I read in April. If you've read any of them, please let me know what you thought about them in the comments down below. Also let me know which was your favorite book that you read in April. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out any of my other videos, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!